thank you very much. It's nice to see such a packed room. I know it's very difficult with these things to figure out which session you're going to go to, and I have that extra fun of going, oh, there's sessions I want to see whilst I'm talking as well. So thank you very much for coming. Also, thank you very much for the team, the London Schooling team, that put on a fantastic show every year, as well as obviously the tech guys here as well, which make things possible and help it when your Wi-Fi dies 8 minutes before you're about to go and do some presentations. So yes, welcome this morning. My name is Chris. I am working currently as a principal consultant at Nebula Consulting. I've been working in the Salesforce space for about 10-ish years now, and along that time I've picked up some certifications, I've picked up some badges as you do, and later on I will share some bits on socials and things like that, so you've got copies of, I'll share out slides and there'll be recordings and things like that later on as well. But enough about me. We're not here to talk about me, we're here to talk about analytics and what we're going to do today. So just to set the scene of what we're going to go over today, so first of all we're going to kick off about receiving a report request and how that generally happens within most businesses. We're then going to look at how we then understand those requirements that they've been given to us. We're then going to look at starting to build from what we know, from the information and the questions that we're asking. Then we'll look at how we can then take that to the next level using CRM Analytics. We're then going to look at some analytics stuff in action, so pray the Wi-Fi doesn't die and my live demo doesn't fall flat on its face. And then we're going to start looking at how you can then use that so you can start leading with data. And then we'll have a bit of a recap at the end, and if we can squeeze some time in at the end, we'll also do a bit of Q&A if we do have a bit of time. So how does this reporting malarkey normally start? And I'm going to caveat this straight away with, I'm not going to attempt the accent. But generally what happens is you will have somebody come up to you and give you a really lovely detailed request where they'll be like, yeah, can you build me a report that's going to show me if we're going to hit target for the year? Great. And from that you go, I've got some information there that I can use, but I don't really have enough that I can work with. So the best thing that what I generally tend to do within these circumstances is you get what they've given you and then start breaking that down into smaller chunks to try and figure out what is that person actually after. So just from that one sentence, there's a few key pieces in there that we know that are important to us. So for example, the word sales is mentioned, and in the Salesforce space, we generally talk for sales, we relate that to opportunities. And we're going to talk about a few different parts of Salesforce today, but we're only going to talk about native functionality. We're not going to go down any customized routes or anything like that, so just pure Sales Cloud. So we can make an assumption, sales mean opportunities, which means we're going to do some sort of opportunity reporting. Then there's also the target element. So we know that there's a target element. The way that Salesforce natively handles that is the collaborative forecasting quotas. So we can make an assumption that there's going to be some target elements, so we can look at forecasts and we can look at opportunities. And there's also year. So there's a time frame built into this. So we know that there's an element of that. But it still doesn't really give us what we're after, because that could mean so many different things. And we need to make sure we understand what that sales manager is after when he's asking for this information. So before that person runs away, because they generally do like to come up to your desk and go, and if you're an admin or a consultant or anything like that, you've probably had a similar experience where someone just goes up, gives you something really vague, and then goes to run away. So before they go, you quickly grab their arm and go, whoa, 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 whoa. I need a bit more information than that. And the way that I start looking at that is we look at what things are we measuring in that report, because that will determine what we are going to be building, what we're going to be using, and that can make a real difference to our type of report. So within those measurements, we look at what records we're reporting on. We made some assumptions that opportunities and forecasting quotas of what the person's after. We don't know. We need to validate that fact of which records we're using. Quotas could be stored in a custom object. They might not even be on Salesforce yet. So we need to validate that, otherwise whatever we build is going to be completely useless. We then need to understand what they're actually measuring. So you quite often will have different types of amounts on records. So on our opportunities, we might have the standard amount field. They might be talking about quantity. They might be talking about ACV or annual contract value. It could be TCV or total contract value. we need to know that because those numbers are going to be wildly different from each other. And if you give someone and go, the answer is 42, and they go, well, I was expecting 2 million, they're not going to be very happy, are they? So we need to make sure we validate that. And again, we mentioned that there was a year in that, but what do we mean by year? Are they talking about calendar year? Are they talking about custom fiscal year? Are they talking about year to date? Because again, those numbers will be wildly different if we start building reports with them. And filters in place. I've had this so many times where people go, yeah, I need an opportunity report. And you start building one and they go, no, that's wrong, because we only care about the new business when we talk about opportunity reports. And making that assumption that I know what they're talking about, we need to double check that that's the case. We also need to validate every time you've asked for me. We've always got this filter. It might be a record type. It might be a pick list value or something like that. But we need to check which filters are in place because, again, that can really impact our reporting. And then the next thing I generally check is the audience, because the audience impacts what style of report you're going to do, how that report's going to be delivered. So the first thing is looking at who within the business is looking at that, because as a general rule of thumb, people that are higher up in the business aren't going to be looking into the nitty-gritty details. That's not obviously the case in all businesses, but someone that's in the C-suite quite often would like just to say, show me a number, put it in color coding so I know, is it a bad number or is it a good number? And if it's a good number, happy days. If it's a bad number, we'll look into it. Whereas the people at the bottom of the chain, the actual sales reps that are dealing with that, probably care more about line by line, what their opportunities are doing, how they are. So those reports are going to be different because of that. We also need to look at how frequently that will be run. Is it something that gets run every day? Is it something that is just a monthly report, a weekly report? Because again, that helps us understand the granularity of that information. It understands the types of actions and the behaviours that are going to be driven off the back of this report. So by understanding that it might be a daily thing, the likelihood is it's going to be more granular because it's driving action for individuals to do something. Whereas a monthly report, it might be more focused on looking at those high-level numbers and looking at what we've gone back to. A trick that I've always used in the past is also, do you have anything similar? Because there could be a report in Salesforce already that someone's already built, has all the columns in there, has all the filters in there that they care about. Or more likely, someone has an Excel spreadsheet that they've been working away on, that they've then been whittling all this stuff together, and that helps you understand the structure of what that person is looking for. It helps you get to that piece where you're saying, okay, right, that's great, you're looking for this, can I validate that this is what you're looking for, but slightly tweaked and changed here? And that can cut a lot of the questioning back and forth out. And finally, a very quick check is, double check that they are Salesforce users. I've had it before where you go off, you build a report and you go, great. And they go, oh no, they don't have a license. Oh, how are they going to use that report then? So double check that you've got that. So in our scenario with our sales manager, we're grabbed him by the arm, stopped him from running away. And we're going to then go, right, that's great. Here's the answers that we're going to give you. So he's told you we're talking about opportunities and quotas. He cares about the opportunity amount field. It's filtered by new business only, looking at the calendar year. The report's designed for line managers and sales managers to look at things on a monthly basis. They don't have anything in place at the moment. And yes, they are Salesforce users. So happy days. We've got something. We've got a lot of information there, and we can start building from that. So being good, I go off and I go and build my report and I build a dashboard, and I've got things in there like what my pipeline, how much I've got targeted, how much I've won, where are we on there, key deals and things like that. And we hand that over to the sales manager and say, right, here you go, here's your report, that's what you're after. And he then comes back and goes, whoa, hold on. I don't actually trust any of this data. I don't trust the numbers, they don't make sense. It could be because he's got his Excel spreadsheet that he's been fiddling around with the data in it rather than being inside Salesforce, and like, the numbers don't match. So you get that vague request again of, yeah, just fix it and come back to me. So you go, okay, there's an element of trust in here. So what do we do next? And how do we get those numbers that are trusted? So first of all, you turn around and go, okay, what don't you trust about it? What does good look like? Because we've given high-level numbers. We've said these are the actual numbers of your pipeline, but we haven't actually said like how accurate those numbers are and whether those deals are going to close or not. And so you generally ask that person, what did it look like? And this is the general facial expression that you'll get from them when you ask that question. So you then go, right, okay, I'm going to need to give you a little helping hand with this and delve into it a little bit more. So I'll give you some starter points. So when we're looking at a good deal, is it to do with the size of the deal? No, you've still got that facial expression. Is it to do with the type of account? Different types of accounts might have different sales cycles, different lengths. No, still not sure. Is it to do with products? Different products will have different sales cycles, different products will might have better values and things like that. That could impact which deal, whether the deal's going to close or not. It could be the salesperson leading it. We obviously know in most sales teams you're going to have weaker and stronger people. You're going to have people that will close more deals than others that don't, or more junior people that it takes them longer to do something with. Is it to do with how long the opportunity's open? Have you got a bunch of zombie opportunities in there that have had their close date pushed out for the last 36 months because the salesperson just can't get rid of it, he just can't help himself. But is it to do with that? Or could it be to do with the number of activities that have been logged? Obviously, we, as admins and consultants in that, you're going, you need to log those activities, and the salespeople are going, I really don't want to. But you might see patterns in there where you're saying, well, we've got activities, but different people might have more logged. Is there a trend between that? Like, do you need to do is it 3 meetings or more results in a better close date? And you can probe as much as you can until eventually they snap and they turn around to you and go, I don't know, you're the expert, you tell me. And there's obviously a part where you sit there and go, okay, well, I might know the tech and I might know some of the data, but I don't know the behaviors behind that data, and I don't know where that is sort of going within this. So how do I tell you what's going on in your business with your teams? So that's where we then bring in CRM Analytics. So the ones that are paying attention in the room might have noticed that the dashboard that I built was a lightning dashboard, because that's where we generally start. You start quick and easy. And this is where CRM Analytics takes things and takes it to the next level and does something a little bit different with the data that we're looking at. So we're going to do a quick recap because I've been burned by this before, and make sure that we're all on the same page in this room. So when we talk about CRM Analytics, we're talking about a company that Salesforce bought way back when called EdgeSpring. They then rebranded it as Wave Analytics, which then sometimes they chuck in Analytics Cloud just for the fun of it. That's been floating around every now and then. It then got into Einstein Analytics. So with Einstein Analytics, it's probably the name that most people have stuck with before they tried to confuse everyone and rename it Tableau CRM. And last year I submitted a talk for Tableau CRM and ended up delivering one on CRM Analytics because they renamed it in between. And I left this one in just in case they rebranded it last night, because you never know. I think the only other platform that's probably given this a run for its money is Data Cloud, which they've gone through like 5 names in the space of 12 months, which is quite impressive. But when we talk CRM Analytics, we're talking about all of this stuff. And it has been on a big journey. So the stuff that you could do when it was back in EdgeSpring is far superior now. We're in CRM Analytics land. So I would talk about CRM Analytics or CRM as its abbreviated term, because it's a really confusing name as well. Try Googling that when you're searching for terms. But why would we use CRM Analytics? A few pointers. We can interact with things. We can use the data that we've got presented in front of us. We can drill down into that, and we can get to the information that we care about quickly. Have you ever put a dashboard filter on a lightning report and waited 20 minutes till they actually showed the data when you put the filter in place? We don't have that issue here. We can make changes and then preview them instantly. None of this, I can see 20 records in my report builder and I have to toggle that little switch or keep hitting the refresh button every time I make a single change. This is, I drag, I drop, I play, done. We can also join data that's not possible through standard reporting. So we talked about lots of different data, and Salesforce report types are limited in what you can join up and how that joins work together. So we can actually take that to the next level, and we can build stuff that isn't possible. And not just with Salesforce data as well. We can bring data in from other systems. We can have marketing systems that might not be connected to Salesforce and connect those directly in here and merge the data, maybe Google Analytics or something like that. Things that we can have a wide structure of different systems all in Salesforce, all within one data set. We can also view that data in different ways. So if you remember when I said about like different people need to see things in a different way, and people in the C-suite might prefer to have a single number with color coding. It's really easy for us to do that, or to use text or something like that to represent that data. We're not limited by the few different visualizations that we have in native Salesforce. And we can then take things to the next level. So we can get Einstein, which is built in, that can do predictions, it can do forecasting, it can do clustering, where you feed it data and it will then go, right, I'm going to group this into 3 categories, all of your data that are similar. So you can look for those trends and things like that. And we can do this with not hundreds, not thousands, but billions of rows of data. So we can go crazy with our data sets. I was only in a conversation yesterday where we said, oh, could we move this into standard reporting? And I went, you do know that I've got over 200,000 records in this data set at the moment, just looking at this target. And I went, okay, yeah, let's leave it in analytics. But all of this, we can actually do with clicks, not code. We can take it to the code. We can do a lot more with it if we wanted to, but we can do all of this stuff without doing anything with the clicks. So we talked about lots of different data and things that impacted our opportunities. And when we were doing those probing questions to our sales manager, we asked questions about, is it to do with activities or to do with products and things like that? And this sort of very simplified version of the data model inside Salesforce shows that a lot of that data doesn't actually sit on the opportunity. So when you're using standard reporting, it means that you don't have that information readily available, because you've got objects all over the place which are storing data that's valuable to you, that you just can't get hold of, because you can't do can I have a report with opportunities, with activities, with products, with forecasting quotas and accounts and users? It just doesn't work. So what we can do in CRM Analytics, and we're going to not go into this today because it took me forever, but we're going to build that and take that in. So if you're not familiar with working with CRMA, the way that it works is we have data from our different sources. That could be Salesforce, spreadsheets, other databases. We then push that data into CRMA. It's a blank database to start off with. And once it's been pushed in, we then prepare that data in what's called a recipe, and within that recipe, it then generates these data sets. So your data set is the equivalent of your report type inside Salesforce. But the power of it is you're not limited on drop-down menus of which objects you can put in there. You can go crazy with those things. And once you've got your data sets, that's what you're then running your reports off of. That's where you're generating your information. So this is a visualization of the data set that I'm going to be using later when we look into the system. And this is where we've got our sales card data across multiple objects. We're bringing that into our recipe builder, and then we're joining that together. And the beauty of us joining that together is that we can filter, we can manipulate the information a little bit, we can aggregate that. So it's very easy for us to do things such as, I'll get all my tasks, divide those tasks in between calls and actual tasks and events and things like that, and put that together and then roll those up to an opportunity to say this opportunity had this many emails, this many phone calls, this many tasks, this many meetings. And we can do that all within the data set that we have available to us, and we can aggregate that until we get our data set at the end. And that gives us this big almighty data set that we can then start working with. So, as I said, we're going to have, and we're going to brave it as I switch screens right now, so hopefully it all works. But I don't want to kill you with PowerPoint, so let's jump into the system. So we're now inside CRM Analytics. This is what CRMA calls a lens. So a lens is basically your equivalent of a report. And being a visualization platform, you can see immediately that it puts us into a chart. We're not looking at raw rows of data. If we wanted to, we could. But this is where we can then start exploring that data. So we can start playing around with it and actually looking for things that matter, or look for trends and things like that. We also have a little helping hand at the top, because sometimes you're really not sure where to get started with this information. So I can click here at the top and I can start typing in, say, I want to look at the average cycle length by close date. Let's see if it works. No, it doesn't. But we can put that in where it will then generate that information for us. And let's do what it was meant to be doing. And you can see as we're building this information, it's automatically generating that. So this is looking at, what did we say? There was almost 8,000 rows of data here, and that automatically just went, yeah, let's chuck that in, put it in bars by month. But we can then say, right, actually what I cared about, which is what I wanted, which was average cycle length. And you can see how quickly that changes. Imagine trying to you struggle with the 2,000 rows of data in your Salesforce reports where you wait 5 minutes for that to load. So we can then start looking at that and playing around with that data a little bit more. So we could then say, actually make that a bit more user-friendly. I want to put it in a timeline mode, so I've got a line graph so I can sort of see where that trend is. And we can see that our average cycle length is a bit volatile. It's not quite straight. There's bumps in the road. We don't know if that actually means anything or not. But we can start asking questions of the data and playing around with the data to get to where we want it to be. So let's add another line in, for example, and say how much we've won. And we will put that on a chart where we're looking at a dual axis. So we're adding down one side, we've got which data we care about, and then on the opposite side of the screen is how we're then visualizing that data. So we're saying, from within here, I care about those two lines, and then I want to view it in this format. I want it to have in this style, whether it's lines or bars or pies. And then you can see here. So how much are we winning versus the cycle length? It's not massively a trend there. It's not like there's a correlation between those two bits of data, but that's just us looking at a couple of examples. We can keep probing that. We can use that bar at the top when it wants to work, not in a live demo environment, of course, but we can use that to sort of say, what should I look for? And as you saw, when I started typing in there, it's giving me examples. It's going, oh, would you like to care about this? And then you start going, yeah, I care about that. But would you like to segment it by this? And it just gives you a way of, it's a bit of a playground, really. So you can save these down, and you can then say, oh, I've got this graph, and it looks at that, and it looks at this. But they're really useful for playing with that data, getting some quick answers, and giving you some ideas of what you should be caring about and how that sort of looks. But we can then take that to the next level. So the next level would be, we build what I'd call an exploration dashboard. So this dashboard is not for your average user, but it is designed for you to look into that data in a bit more detail, to start looking for those trends and patterns. So this whole phase is in that bit of, I don't trust the numbers. This is where we play around with the data to figure out which numbers should you be trusting and how do you trust those numbers. So at the moment, I've got, there's a lot of filters on the top. And the way I decided on those filters was by going into the lens and looking at things that seem to be impacting my data. And then at the bottom, I've got this graph. And you can see at the moment, I've got how much is committed versus how much of quota I've done. I've got for the sales team. So the committed is those deals right at the end of the sales cycle that the sales team should be going, that's a done deal, pretty much. So to see that number over the next couple of months is under our target line is a little bit worrying. But to double check, we can go in here and you can see from this menu, I've got loads of different metrics that I can then start bringing in. And I can just say, okay, well, actually, let's see that against the one opportunities that I've got in here. And you can see, actually, we've had quite a good year at the moment. Like, we've pretty much been over what we were targeted, but that number is going downwards. And what we're committing isn't quite strong enough. So we can start looking at that. We can break it down into different ways. You can see I'm currently looking at it. At the moment, it's by close date by month and year. I could change that to be by quarters because some companies care about the quarters more than they care about the individual months. But I can play around with that and look into those trends and answer those questions. If you've ever sat with someone that's asking you questions and you can show them the information and they watch the screen and they're watching all this whizzing around and you go, that's the answer. They're like, how did you get that? Normally that takes me a week of manipulating a spreadsheet to get there. So we can then start looking at that information. We can start looking at things, but it's not just raw data. We can start aggregating that data in the way that we want to do it. So we could do things such as we can calculate values. So we can say, what's our close rate and bring that in. So if I remove those other lines in here and just bring a close rate line, you can see that there is a bit of a trend. We're sort of averaging between that mark, but at the moment there's a downward trend on that. So the close rate is going down at the moment, but what's impacting that? We mentioned earlier that there's activities, and we could bring those in. So we could see, okay, right, depending on our sales team, what activity are they doing, logging activities in there? Surprisingly, there are some lines on here. But you can see it's relatively flat. So we know that there's not anything, like we can't draw conclusions from that. Now that might be because people just aren't logging anything, and there's just a couple of people that are doing stuff, and it's a bit inconsistent. But this helps us to understand what's going on with our data, what the trends of that information are looking like, and that allows us to then make decisions off of that back of that data. That doesn't need to be necessarily decisions of what we're going to do. So that could be things such as, right, we need to do a marketing initiative that's going to help us to improve that. That could be, we need to do training for the sales team because they're not logging what we need them to log. But it gives us an indication, it starts building up this picture of what are reports that the salespeople should be looking at, and starts building up that picture, because it's saying, well, this is impacting what salespeople do, so the salespeople should care about this number, so we should be putting that number in front of them. But we can also bring that and look at it in different ways. So in we've looked at our graph, which is great for looking for those high level trends, but classic. I'm going to have all the tech issues today. Let's see if this works. But we can look at that, and we can see within that data in a different view. And if you can give someone a table view, which is more familiar to that realm of Excel spreadsheets, people start feeling more comfortable about things. But we can look into things in more detail. So you can see at the moment we've got opportunity owners, and we're looking at the commitment quotas. But if we change those and add some more things in here, so let's say what have people won, how many opportunities do they have, what's their average close rate, deal cycle, sales cycle, what pipeline do they require, what's their coverage, and we bring that all in, you can see that I can just very quickly bring that data in and display that information. I can also say, right, I want to look at who's got the highest close rate. So we're going to sort it, so the person at the top has got the highest close rate. And we can start looking at their data. And we're looking at an individual's level of saying, right, okay, what in this rest of this data is this person doing that the person at the bottom is not? Are there any trends in that? Are there things such as the average sales cycle, the deal cycle? We can do some formulas and stuff like that, which inside this data to come up with numbers. So if you speak to sales, traditionally sales managers would go, I need, whatever my quota is, I need 3 times that amount in my pipeline because that's what I'm going to close. Well, no, you don't. That's like you're going to have different salespeople that have got different things. There'll be more junior people that might need 10 times their pipeline value in there for them to be able to close their target. There might be people that only need 2 times or 1.5 times in there. And you can build those calculations. So by you automatically looking at what that person's target is, how long does a deal last within there, what they've got in there, you can calculate what do they actually need in their pipeline for them to hit their target. And you can then also look at how much of that has been covered based on what they've got in the system. Now, obviously, this is all reliant on the data being good in Salesforce, and this is another tool that you can then use to say, well, actually, why is that person's information really good and that person's not? Is there a training that we need to do? Is there anything more that we need to do within that? But we're showing the data as it is. We're not manipulating that data somewhere else in a spreadsheet. If you want to see this data change, you go into Salesforce, you change the data in Salesforce, and it'll be reflected in our dashboard. So you can then start looking at that. But it's not just individuals. You can then look at that, and it could be you might want to look at it as roles. So in my example, my demo data, my roles are more regional based. We could be looking at it as individual managers. So I can group this data together in different ways and say, okay, aggregate that data by the different managers and see how, is it different managers that are performing in a different way. But another one is also looking at products and product families. Let's click there. Because in this data, we've got 3 different types of products that we sell. And you can see that there's different close rates, but there's also different deal cycles, and there's also, and more importantly, the average sales cycle is different. And that's important for us to know, because if we look at this and we say that the professional service stuff generally closes quicker than the software side of things, if you've got a gap in your pipeline that you need to fill in the short term, you need to focus on those types of deals rather than those ones, because those ones are going to be too late for you. So you can then utilize this information to then start putting together strategies on that data, to start looking at where you're going to be taking this, where you're going to build from this, and how you're going to present that data to the manager. So we're doing all of this exercise for finding the information to try and figure out what the truth actually is. How likely is something going to close? And we don't have to be talking about opportunities. We can do this on any data. This could be service data. It could be like average close rates of cases, or how quickly do we close, and things like that. It could be data that's unrelated to standard CRM stuff. But it allows us the flexibility to answer those questions and start looking for those trends, because yes, we all know there's loads of these tools around. We've got our Einsteins, we've got our AIs, everyone's going nuts for them at the moment. But traditional, especially in places like traditional sales teams and stuff like that, those are black boxes that people go, oh, that's the answer. And there has to be trust within that to say, well, actually, how did you get to that number? And you go, well, the AI told me it was that number, so it must be that number. Whereas within this, you can be exploring that data and playing around with it a little bit to help guide and show and prove why these are the things that you should be caring about, and how to present that. And you might go, that's all great and wonderful. Nobody does this in real life, right? You might be going, no one's really sitting here building this and spending hours doing it. But I can tell you for a fact, there is a little known company which, if you're not aware of them, I don't know what you're doing here, but they're called Salesforce. And Salesforce have a dashboard exactly like this. I've seen it, I've played around with it. And they have a team that are dedicated to figuring out what's going on at individual levels, teams, departments, countries, product lines. Then they sit here and they look at this data and they play around with this, and it's got visual guidance on different things. And they use this to then do their marketing initiatives. So they all sat there in front of us looking at this data and going, oh, right, okay, so we know that the average sales cycle for Marketing Cloud is shorter at the moment for the sales cycle of Sales Cloud. So maybe we need to be pushing more Marketing Cloud initiatives at the moment, and how do we get in there? And they've got teams that are dedicated to doing this, and then going to the sales team and go, right, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to help you, this is why. And they've got this data to play back. And so from within this, you can then go, right, I've got the proof of why we need to do this, because things are changing a lot at the moment. We know, again, using Salesforce as an example, how much they panicked recently because their average deal cycles just skyrocketed. And we could see that trend in that dashboard. We could see that coming up, where you look at that line, and they probably had a similar line at one point going, oh, what's happening here? How do we combat that? Because all of your forecasting originally was based off of that old trend of it takes a deal to go through this length, but that number's changing, and it does change over time. So within that, we can then look at that, and we can start playing around with that. So if we go back to our sales manager, where does this leave us? So from the high level numbers, we can say to them, look, okay, our data is showing currently that you're not going to hit your target for the year. And we've got the evidence to back it up. So what would we then do as the next step? We're not going to give the sales manager that dashboard. We can give them access to it, but that's not what they want. They don't want to have to try and find their data each time. But what we can do is we can build their own dashboard. We can build a sales dashboard in CRM Analytics, but based off the results that we found in our original dashboard. So we can then say, right, okay, these are the metrics, and then you can use your exploration dashboard to explain why you get them. Because if you can back it up and show the person, go, we've got this metric, and the reason we've got this, and they'll be like, why are you looking at that? And you go, oh, because the data's showing us that actually impacts your sales cycle. And they go, oh, okay, I didn't know that. And if you can use that exploration dashboard as a bit of a backup, you can then show why you're doing things. So we would do that, we'd then present that, we'd explain the metrics, And then off the back of that, the sales manager will delete all of their spreadsheets and never use them again. Yeah, I'm going to remove that one because that's a lie. Right, we know that's never going to happen in a million years. But the principle's there. And the more we can do this stuff, the more you can make it feel like an Excel spreadsheet, and the more they can play around with that. Because that's why people go into Excel, because it's easy to manipulate the thing and go, oh, I want these columns in here, and I want it sorted in this order and grouped by this, and remove that. If you can do that in a dashboard, you're removing that, you're scratching that Excel itch that those people have. So where does that sort of pass? So to sort of recap, what we need to do within this is we look at building data sets and connect that data that could impact our deals. Don't just focus on stuff that's sat on the record that you're focusing on. Think about the different types of relationships that data has with other bits of data in your system and see how that's then impacting it. So build that all together. Then you can then use your lenses to explore that data quickly, answer questions, figure out which metrics are important to you, figure out which different metrics could be important for different teams and things like that, but figure out what they care about so that you can then build an exploration dashboard, which you can then look into that data, dive into it, figure out what's going on, and then importantly, don't stop. This is a journey, this is a cycle that goes round. We're not saying you do these 4 things, ta-da. You can't. You need to start again. You need to keep using those lenses. You need to keep adding more data into that data set where you find out, oh, actually, maybe this is impacting it. Maybe it's the marketing information. So maybe I should add in campaigns. That's probably something that might impact the sales cycle. So I'm going to add campaigns into that data set. And then I'll then play around with the lenses and I'll figure out which filters and groupings and things that I need in my exploration dashboard. But then I keep building those business dashboards and then explaining, oh, we've added this new widget into your sales dashboard because of this, and go through that cycle again. And typically, whilst I was going through all of this comic pics popped up. And I think this is important for that final point. You see it all the time where people go, we're a data-driven company, we get all this data, we play around with it, we do all of this fun stuff, and we build stuff that is valuable to the business, and then the business turn around and go, I don't care, can we just do that anyway? And that's important, that final step of that recycle, reuse, go back around, check the data, the continuous changing, but actually use it. Because if you're not using it, what is the point of you doing that, all of that there? You need, the first time that you go around that cycle is to try and help you sell, this is the method to doing it, and you're going through that sales pitch. But once you've done that sales pitch and you can prove its worth, it's a lot easier to keep updating it and get people to use it and try and get rid of some of those spreadsheets. So there are obviously lots of things out there. As I said, CRM Analytics has changed a lot over the years, and Trailhead is quite good now with a lot of modules within there. They also have a learning map with loads of different resources that are then linked up. You can get your own trial org online as well, so you can just quickly sign up so you can play around with all this stuff. There are community groups out here, so there is a London Data Tribe group which looks at analytics stuff. They meet generally every other month or so, sometimes in person, sometimes digital as well, so you can help you attend. And I'd say out of that, 2 of the most resources that I tend to use are the Salesforce blog site and Let's Play Salesforce videos. So if you get stuck on certain things, you can go there and go, I'm trying to do this. Part of the reason being because Salesforce screwed the pitch on the SEO, so it's really difficult to try and find stuff in Google now. And we post stuff as Nebula in our blogs, which we call our insights as well. So thank you very much for all coming today. I don't think we have that much time for questions.
Flowsum is an all-in-one DevSecOps security automation and data management solution for Salesforce that will help you regain full control of your Salesforce instance. With Flowsum, secure and accelerate your entire development lifecycle. Keep control of your data with data backup, recovery, archival, seeding, and more. And maintain cybersecurity posture while bringing governance to your platforms with an adaptive framework. Check out Flowsum on the Salesforce App Exchange to learn more, or visit flowsum.com.